Good afternoon. I am going to give it a few minutes to give people time to join. All right. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are. I am giving it a few minutes for people to join, and then we'll get started. Happy Sunday. All right. We got a slow start today. I am going to give it a few more minutes. And if I don't have any folks join today, I will just cover my content and keep it moving. All right. Good morning. Good afternoon. I am giving it a few more minutes. And then I will get started. Give some folks time to join. Good morning. Good afternoon, depending on where you are. Today we are doing our frequently asked questions. I am waiting a few minutes to give folks time to join before I get started. Hopefully we'll have some questions that I can answer, and I will talk about my content and then see what else we have. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining. All right. I'll give it a couple more minutes and then we'll get started. Thank you for joining. Hello, hello. All right. I said a couple more minutes and I'm not even waiting a couple more minutes. All right. I'm going to be patient. All right. I'm going to go ahead and get started. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are. My name is Jewel Pearson. Let me share my slide. There we go. My name is Jewel Pearson, and this is Miss Bohemian Soul TV. This is Creating Home, a tiny house series, and this segment is the What's Your Question segment in the series. Every Sunday, I offer live content, and I alternate between our conversations on intimate spaces where I'm interviewing guests in and around the tiny house movement. And then on the opposite Sundays, I'm doing What's Your Question, where I answer frequently asked tiny house questions and talk to tips and tricks that people should know that are interested in tiny houses, in the journey, etc. To introduce myself, I built a kind of fancy tiny house in 2015, and since that time, I have shared my journey to hopefully inspire others who are interested in the movement. I offer coaching and consultations to help others in their tiny house journey. You'll be able to find links to schedule a consultation with me in the video description once this video goes live. And I serve up a lot of representation in the movement along the way. It is important to me for us to see ourselves also in this movement. It is my intent to build figurative and literal community that is inclusive and accessible. And I hope that if you find this information and the video helpful, that you'll like it, you'll share it, and also subscribe to my channel and turn on the notifications so that you'll know when content is available. All right, so this afternoon we are talking about, this is again the What's Your Question segment of the series, and I have planned to talk about winterization of tiny houses. As I've touched on this conversation a bit before, but I want to cover it in a little bit more detail. I know we're headed hopefully towards spring very soon. I know it's gotten colder again here, but these are some tips and tricks and information that someone interested in tiny houses, even someone that currently lives in a tiny house, should be familiar with around winterization of a tiny house. And I've got some slides that I want to share to talk about winterization. So winterization is important. And again, this content is specific to tiny houses on wheels. Winterization of a tiny house is important because the tiny house isn't on a foundation. So you don't have the benefit of a foundation, the heat, the structural foundation that being the structural assistance that a foundation provides for a home. So you don't have that. Good morning. You don't have that with a tiny house on wheels. So there are some things that you can do to kind of help yourself out. Trying to get my camera right with for winterization. And so that's what we're going to talk about. And so the main thing that you'll want to do is what I call, or I think everybody kind of calls it, wrapping or skirting of a tiny house. And you can see this on the slide here, what wrapping looks like. And so obviously that's my house in the center. I have used plywood around, and wrapping is occurring at the bottom of the house. And so you can see where I've wrapped the front of the house in front of the sunroom. This wrapping goes all the way around the house, around the porch, and all on the sides, and all the way around the back. So wrapping helps with, one, keeping things from up underneath your house, especially like for me out here in the country, keeping animals out from underneath the house. But it also helps with holding heat up underneath your house. Now, as I wrap my house, I also will put foam board insulation behind that plywood. So there is, I think my foam board insulation is about an inch, maybe even an inch and a half thick. And so, good afternoon. So behind that plywood, I have foam board insulation. And so I have taken that all the way around the house. And again, that is to help hold the heat up underneath your house, because you don't have the benefit of a foundation since the tiny house is on wheels. And so you can see some other options here where people have done various forms of skirting or wrapping. So in the upper left-hand corner, it looks like they also have some plywood in front of the tiny house, but they also have this decorative planter. And so while it's decorative, it's also going to help with as a barrier to hold heat and block air from going up underneath the house. And so bottom left, again, looks like it's also maybe some plywood. I'm going to skip over to the right. You can see that over to the right, the house here has some metal wrapping, maybe some roofing material type thing to wrap the house. One of the things, it varies the material that people use. One time I used a polycarbonate panel because I had some panels left over from another project, so I used those for my wrapping that year. Again, I still did put some foam board insulation back behind it to add some additional thickness to it. My very first year, I actually had wrapped the house with a tarp. Again, really what you're trying to do is keep air from flowing up underneath the house and, kind of to block it and provide something that's going to hold the heat up underneath the house. That first year, the tarp worked okay. But then once spring hit, then I took it down because it wasn't attractive. And from that point forward, I decided that as I wrap my house, I do something so that I can leave it on the entire time. So it's not something that I'm adding and removing, something that adds to the decor of the house, something that's not an eyesore, and something that I don't have to do each year as we head into fall and winter. The middle picture, these people have used, I'm going to assume it is straw. So some people use hay, some people use straw. There is a difference in hay and straw in that hay, as I understand it, will attract rodents because it's also used for, it's used for feed for farm animals. So there is a difference in, as I understand it, people say you should use straw. The other thing you have to be careful with hay and straw is the potential for it to be flammable. You want to be, in addition to rodents, you want to also be sure that you're cautious because it can be flammable. But that is something that people will use as well. So that is kind of the understanding for wrapping your home. One of the things I'll point out is, and in the exterior of on the exterior of my house, and we're going to talk about water inlets in just a few minutes. I also have, hello, I also have provided an opening. So if I need to access anything under the house, I can get up underneath the house. So you want to keep that in mind as well. If there's an area underneath the house that you'll want to get to, for example, where your water inlets are, outlets are, you want to be sure that you leave yourself access to be able to get to that area. So that is the wrapping of a tiny house. And so the next slide that I'll talk to in continuing the conversation around winterization and some things that you want to consider. Good morning from California. So you want to consider your house wrapping that we just talked about on the exterior. Also remember your tie down. So up underneath your house, and I've talked about this before, you can refer to some of the other frequently asked videos, and I'll provide a link where I talked about tying the house down for safety. So you'd already have tied your house down and then you're wrapping it. I'll provide a link to the video where I talk about tie downs. And all of this work that you're doing is very similar to what is done for mobile homes. So if you need some additional information, instruction, maybe even material, consider mobile home outlet stores because they have some of this material, or you'll be able to find content to kind of help you understand what it is that you need to do for your home. The other thing that you want to consider for your exterior is when you are installing your water lines. If you plan to be at that location permanently, it would be smarter to consider installing your water lines wherever you're getting your water from the source. You'd want to consider installing your water lines. I think it's 12 or 14 inches below ground, which is below freeze line. So if you start off with that, that's going to help you really from the get-go. If it's a temporary location, you may not want to consider doing that because it is an expense to trench the line and install it. But if you intend to be at that location for a period of time, I do recommend just starting from the beginning and installing your water lines below the freeze line. And then the second thing that you'll want to consider is and I probably should have done this in a different order, but anyway, wrapping, if you have any exposed water lines and inlets. So think about so maybe you've installed your water line below the freeze line, but where that line exits from the ground and connects to your home. or where that line is coming from the source, and there's an area of that line that is exposed. You want to ensure that you're wrapping it, and up in the upper right hand corner of this slide, you can see what wrapping looks like. So that is foam wrap that you can find at your Lowe's, your Home Depot. You are wrapping that line with that foam wrap. And also, I recommend taping it down as they're doing here, because that foam wrap will come, even though it has like a sticky side to it, it will come loose. So you want to wrap any exposed water lines, inlets that could potentially freeze. And as you're considering that, you want to consider your plumbing water that's coming in, wrapping those lines. Your gray water exit, again, gray water is water that is coming from like your kitchen sink, from your shower. It is not black water. Black water is wastewater. Gray water is going to be water that does not include the toilet, that does not include feces. So gray water lines that you have where your gray water is coming out of your home, you want to ensure that you are wrapping any exposed gray water line. So because that water will also freeze. In my case, I do have a black water line that is coming out of my house, because I have some tanks in the backyard that I have my toilet empty out to. So I also have to wrap that pipe that is exposed, that is going to those tanks, to ensure that those lines don't freeze. So anything that has liquid in it that is exiting or entering your home, it can freeze if the temperatures are low enough. So you want to ensure that you're wrapping those lines. And then with that, the water lines, if they should freeze, you need to remember, I said, if you're wrapping the house, you want to be sure that you are leaving access if there's something so that you can get under the house if you need to. So should the lines freeze, there was one year that I had my lines below freeze, below the freeze line. I had wrapped all of my exposed pipes, but the temperatures dropped so low, and it even happened this year. Temperatures dropped so low, and they stayed low for an extended period of time, and the lines froze anyway. So you need to be able to access lines and know how to potentially put a heater up underneath in that area so that it will thaw your pipes. A blow dryer will work. A heated lamp, like there's bulbs that they use in animal areas to, I think it's for chickens. So there's a bulb that you can use and put in that area so that the heat lamp will also unthaw your pipe. So you want to be sure that you have access to pipes just in case they do freeze. If you are in an area, the fourth bullet here, the heated water hose, there are heated water hoses. I think it's the name that I think it is. It's Pyrex or something like that. Um, it has a sensor on it that will kick on. It requires power. Let me say that first. It requires power. It does have a sensor on it that will kick on heat to that water hose if the temperature drops at a certain point. They work very well. The Pyrex, I think I'm saying that name right. I think that's the right name. I've had that line, and it does work well. If you're not burying your utility, your water line, then that line will work, and you can lay it above ground. The thing about that, though, is if you've got to cut grass or anything like that, you want to be sure you're aware of your water line, or whoever's going to be in the area is aware that you have an above ground water line. But heated water hoses are an option. For the exterior, you also want to consider potentially having a secondary power source. So sometimes when it's cold, just extremely cold, you will have, I don't know if it's called a power surge, but you'll have sometimes where power goes out. And so a bonus would be to have a secondary power source, solar, a generator. With using solar as your power source, and we talked about this last week in our conversation series, you want to be sure that, or you may need to consider a secondary source there, because my guest was speaking about not having enough solar power because solar power was being shared. So there's some science that goes into, obviously solar, you're getting the power from the sun. In the wintertime, there are more gray days, and so making sure that you have enough of a battery bank of power stored so that you can have enough power for your home. So that's like a science that needs to be figured out as you're heading into winter if you're using solar power. But having a secondary power source is always a big bonus, and that's something that I actually myself need to figure out and do. Um, and then on the interior, the things that you want to consider for your interior. I didn't talk about this second picture here. These all of this stuff that you see on these pictures it's material that you can find at your Walmart, Lowe's, Home Depot, places like that. So up above, this is probably something you should be familiar with as a homeowner. This cover goes over the faucet, the spigot that is on the exterior, and it's also got insulation. So you're wrapping your line, and then you're also covering that faucet head, so that it is insulated as well. Um, so we talked about interior. So on in the interior, one of the things that I always do as well when I know the temperatures are going to drop is to allow faucets to drip, and that's something that you do in conventional housing so that the water is continuously moving. So if the temperature is dropping, the potential of it freezing lessens. It's not always fail safe. We had a couple of days that were so cold here. I had my faucets dripping, and they still the line still froze. So it's not fail safe, but it is something that will help you out. On the in As you're considering your interior, something else to consider is if you have your heat, if you're using a wood stove as your heat source, you would want to also consider an alternative heat source, or an additional heat source, I guess I should say. Because with a wood stove, if you're not at home, if you're traveling, you can't leave that, and it's in cold temperature. Obviously, you can't leave the wood stove burning. Even running out to the store, it's probably not a good idea. If you I, Let me not speak on what I don't really know. I just know that a wood stove shouldn't be left unattended for obvious reasons. So consider having an alternate heat source so that the home doesn't drop below freezing because the heat's not on, the wood stove's not on, as well as when you arrive at home, trying to heat the house back up with a wood stove when it's been cold for a long time is also going to be a process. So consider having an alternative heat source if a wood stove is going to be your main source of heat. And then also on the interior, you would want to consider rugs and floor covering. I should have also added here radiant flooring. Again, because your tiny house on wheels is not on a foundation, the floors stay colder. So rugs and floor coverings, and the potential, maybe if you want to consider radiant flooring so that the floors are continuously warm, you would want to consider that as an option. All right, that is the information that I had on my list to cover for winterization. So we talked about skirting, wrapping your house, and the options there. And then we talked about the details of winterization around the exterior and interior, and some tips and tricks there. Um, Questions. Anybody have a question that I can answer? I'm going to um, stop sharing. Any questions about winterization that I can answer, or any questions overall around tiny houses, the tiny house journey, from anyone in the chat, since we're here and I can answer questions. If not, we can call it a short session. Thank you all for joining. I'll give it a few minutes to see if any questions come in. right. Oh, oh, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for joining. All right. It doesn't look like anyone has any questions. I hope that information was helpful. I'll talk slow just to see if anybody else comes up with a question before I close out. All right. Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. There's a, I keep my librarian changes, my librarian chain. I feel like an old lady librarian. Oh, here's a question. How hard was it to move your home? Um, um, Not extremely hard. Like the actual physical moving of my house is not extremely hard. I don't move it. My house is big enough and heavy enough that I don't mess with it. I hire professional movers. It does require a dually or Ford, like I think it's a F450 and above, or 250, something with a big engine. And it's bigger than what I have. And plus, I prefer to use the professionals because they're professionals, and they also have insurance. And so um, usually this, and so in this location, I don't intend to move my home, which is why I've already added on, why I added this sunroom space in my screened-in porch. I don't intend to move my home, but when I've been in previous locations and have moved my home, it is the effort in undoing my utility connections. So my water, electricity, my waste tanks, and undoing all of that infrastructure. Clearly, I've got to add that infrastructure at the new place. So there's some cost involved in that. Anything I have on the exterior, I've gotten to the point now where I will put all of that in a moving truck, because stuff that's been on the outside also has, bugs. So I don't put that. When I moved early on, like the very first time that I moved my house, anything that was outside, I could just put on the inside and move the house. But now stuff that has sat outside that's dirty and has bugs, I just actually get a moving truck to put it in there, because I don't want it on the inside of the house. Um, and then on the interior of the house, anything that's going to fall and break. So I take pictures off of the wall. I tape up drawers and doors so that things aren't swinging open. And I put stuff in boxes, and I'll just put the boxes inside the house and just take that stuff off, but put it in a box cushioned inside of the house. So anything that might fall off the wall or fall down and break, I'm doing that. And securing stuff that might slide around, like my couch isn't going to move, but anything that could potentially move, I'm either securing it, bungee cording it, um, and then I hire movers. And so a mover comes, the service comes, and I can put the company that I use, I can put their information in the description, and they have a person that comes and moves the house. It's a lot nerve wracking for me. So I have got to the point where I don't actually watch it move anymore, because it is nerve wracking to watch your all of your money kind of move down the street. So I've learned not to watch it if I don't have to. And then when I get to the new location, then I have to install all of that infrastructure again that I just mentioned, that I undid at the previous location. I also have to do the wrapping, everything that we just talked about for winterization. I've got to do all of that again. Excuse me. Excuse me, at the new location. So there is, when I move, obviously I with the effort that goes into moving my home, I don't move. I didn't move previously unless I intended to be at that location for at least a year, a couple of years, because of the expense of moving. and the effort of the infrastructure installation again. So I have to do all of that again at a new location. So there's an expense. There's also the unknown. Like I haven't been at this location, so this new location. So I don't know exactly how winter will go here. So it's kind of an effort of tweaking it until you get adjusted at a new location if you're relocating, of how things will work at that location. It's not impossible. People who have smaller homes and don't have all of, the exterior stuff that I have, it's less of an effort. Some people can move their home with their own vehicle. If it's a smaller home, they usually will have a truck or something that they can relocate their home themselves. So it's not that much of a production for everyone like it is for me. But that's kind of the process that I go through. Let's see. Oh, how's the tiny trailer coming along? So that is, it hasn't, the project hasn't kicked off, but that is the spring project. It is, let me knock on some wood. It is the plan, waiting for the warmer weather, and then that's the next project, and hopefully we'll get started and wrap that up soon. So thanks for asking. I will keep you all in the loop. I'm excited to work on that. All right, I don't see any other questions. Thank you for those questions. Thank you all very much for joining. I try to spend this time in figurative community so that I can answer questions. This is the free service. So if you don't want to book a consultation, you can ask some questions here and I can answer them as I can. And I hope that this information is valuable to someone interested in tiny houses or considering a tiny house or in a tiny house, so that you can use some of the resources here. All right, I think that's it for today. Thank you all again for joining. And let me share the other screen again. So this has been thank you, and same to you. This has been the What's Your Question segment of the Creating Home, a Tiny House series. We were talking today about winterization of tiny houses. Next week, we'll be in conversation with somebody. I got to figure out who we're talking to next week, but next week will be the conversations on intimate spaces, where I am speaking to, and hello, speaking to and interviewing someone in and around the tiny house movement. So hopefully we'll have a great conversation lined up for you for next Sunday. Again, I offer this content every Sunday at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if this video was helpful to you, I hope you will like it, share it, tell your friends about it, and be sure to subscribe to the channel and then turn on the notification so you'll know when new content is happening and we're going live. So I thank you all for joining this afternoon, and I wish you all a very great day. Thank you so much.